I call the meeting to order on today, the 6th of, or is it the 5th of June, 5 p.m.
So Tammy can hear us.
Which one?
Yeah, great. I can do roll call if you want.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Tammy. Here. Great. Aaron. Here. Looks like Travis is just connecting. Travis, are you here?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, great. Valerie. Does not look like she is on here. Michael.
Here.
Andrea.
Here.
And Denise.
Here.
And then Counselor Prokop is here. Great.
And can I get approval for the agenda from May 1st, 2023? Yes, I approve. Thank you.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Oh, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Well, we didn't have
Aye.
discussion, did we? No discussion?
Of the,
I don't think there's any discussion. They were short minutes,
We're
right?
trusting.
Okay.
okay, great. Then the survey. So last time we had discussed the survey, you had asked about, we had done a listening session as part of the, I think the very first What's Up that we organized. And we had asked a couple questions as part of that listening session, which I included in your packet, and we only asked 2 questions. And so I didn't know if you want to use these to build your survey, or if you want to adjust them or just have completely new questions. But the questions that we had asked at that listening session were, what barriers to access or inclusion have you experienced or witnessed in Estacada? And what questions or issues should the council consider to ensure access and inclusion for city services, programs, and infrastructure? So to kind of go back, when we added the survey to our goals, we were thinking the survey is going to be used as part of our outreach.
We're gonna make this in the form of.
Speak into your microphone, Denise. Sorry. So we haven't sent this out yet, right?
No,
Okay.
we haven't even decided on the questions. So that's all we have to do today is decide on the questions.
I would suggest we put the survey in the form of a multiple choice. Otherwise, we're going to get a different answer for every single person that answers the survey.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with that. I had a discussion. I agree. I had a discussion with somebody recently about surveys being a little long-winded and wordy, where I think that that's somewhat of a deterrent for people completing it and participating. But how do we build off of those questions simply? And then what I mean, because essentially we're creating the questions tonight too.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't have to use either of these questions. This was just what we've done in the past.
Okay.
And so it could be something to build off of or start fresh.
Are we focusing this on DEI in local government like it was before? Is it focused on participating in City of Estacada?
Or is it
Or
just sort of representation questions? Like what are we aiming for to get a better idea of what kind of representation people are not necessarily in search of, but feel is lacking?
Does everyone have internet access so they can see these meetings, so they can see things on? Who doesn't have internet access?
So we could get real specific with stuff like that. So internet, transportation,
There you go. Your vote. I mean, there's a lot of us, like, this has been a discussion too. Those of us that live rurally, we can't vote for certain representatives or representation in the city, on the city level. So, you know, maybe there's some other kind of way of representing that voice. As rural voters, I guess.
I think the
Like a field correspondent. You know, I think the first thing that came to mind.
at large kind of, I think they like at large is,
Yeah, at large, that's it.
Is there, do you know, is there some kind of a liaison for people who are living unincorporated that can, you know, I mean, I think that that's somewhat of like what the Granges do. It's kind of a meeting place for people to discuss issues that aren't necessarily urban or suburban
Uh,
issues.
There are some, like, what do they call them? CPOs, communities, something organizations, like
yeah,
there's the
this
Eagle Creek
is-
Barton CPO, and I
Right.
think there's another one too. And they're not city organizations, but they do get together and
Right.
have discussions, and then will contribute their input to Clackamas County because they're in the more Clackamas County area. They're not in city of Estacada. And then there's
language.
you guys that are serving on the board that don't live here, serving on the committees. So just about every committee has a position that somebody can serve who doesn't live inside the city limits,
Right,
but they live
right.
in the school district boundaries.
Okay, thank you.
Except for the traffic and public safety.
I think that
Did
they
they
have,
change it?
I don't know. I'd have to look at the code, but I know that they have opportunities for people who don't live here, but they have other qualities that they, like, I think the
That's like
traffic.
the business owners
Yeah,
though,
like a
as
business
opposed to,
owner.
I don't think there was any openings for anybody to apply who did not live within city limits.
Well, I don't think the business owner has to live within city limits.
Right, but that's not necessarily representing, I mean, that business owner could live in a totally different city. So there wasn't a specific opportunity for an Estacada resident who lives outside of city limits to have a seat.
Mhm.
No, can you guys hear me?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So what Michael said is very true. There's actually, this is one of the only committees people like Michael and I can serve on. We can't be city councilors, you know, we can't do anything. And it's frustrating to me as a Estacadian because I have the address just like everybody else. And I feel very disconnected from this city.
Maybe what we can do, as a question on the survey is to ask if people feel like there's a need for, a CPO position to have a more direct line of representation to the city or to, sort of corresponding commissions. And just, you know, see if that's, if there's enough interest or if there's enough people who sort of share that same sentiment, then we can maybe, you know, take the steps to initiate that position, I guess.
Do other sub councils like ours, I mean, they've got to address this issue too. Do they have?
I think all of them except for
I just,
budget.
yeah, the traffic and public safety does allow someone who lives in the school district now. So I think.
Oh,
they
okay,
did
they
change
changed it.
that.
Okay.
What I'm saying is
Yeah.
could you double up and ask one of their
The other
reps?
commissions, yeah.
If they're, instead of us having one and them having one, them, you know.
Well, and isn't that, couldn't that be sort of, Heidi, I guess I'm asking you, the inverse of your position as city council person, who then sits in with the different commissions? Could we have sort of a person from each commission who lives out of the city limits that then they create a CPO committee or at least a subcommittee or there's like two people. I don't know. I'm just spitballing right now.
Yeah, I would say that probably the easiest way would work. So right now we have at regular council meetings, we'll have reports from things like the Clackamas County Sheriff. And if we had just a standing agenda item where like the CPO or whoever it
Mhm.
was wanted to come in, and that would probably be the easiest rather than forming a
Okay.
subcommittee, which requires a lot of staff time and we don't have.
Right, right.
And then how would you put everyone together to be
Right.
fully representative?
Well, and could we do that with city interest in mind, but not in an official setting? I mean, could there be like we would have a Grange meeting and say, oh, this person from Eagle Creek and this person from George and this person from Springwater or whatever
Mhm.
are all talking about things that they, might concerns that they might have. That then we could have a representative bring to the city time.
That sounds good.
I mean, I guess what we need to do is maybe just turn that into a question for the survey, you know what I mean? Because I think that there's enough people. There's probably more people that live in the surrounding area outside of city limits than there are within the city. In fact, I know there are.
So it sounds like this is going to lead into what's C under your committee business is scheduling the meetings with the community group. So if that's one of the things that you wanted to be a question related to,
That's a good idea.
providing input is you will schedule your meetings with these community groups and ask them and then potentially bring it back to council.
Okay.
So we might want a question on the survey, though, that is asking, do you live within city limits or without? Because then we might be able to deduce from their responses
Mhm.
whether people living outside of city limits feel like they have less access or representation.
Also for my own curiosity, I know that maybe last month at the city council meeting, there was a little bit of feedback about the surveying the public as far as like what information we were trying to glean. So I wanted to make sure that
This came up, our survey came up in the city council meeting.
there was, well, when we did the DIC report, remember? There was a little bit of feedback from Councilperson Lidkey about what kind of information we were trying to get out of people. So I think that we need to, like, is the within or out city limits something that's appropriate, or you know what I mean? Like,
One of the council goals this year is to increase outreach to the unincorporated
Okay.
areas. Yes, so
Perfect.
it would be appropriate for you guys to do outreach to
Okay.
the unincorporated
we're
areas.
asking where people live. I don't know if that's kind of.
Yeah,
where
No,
the-
right
okay.
now there's a yard debris survey on the website and it asks for people's addresses so that we can eliminate
Okay,
inside and outside city limits because that impacts the rates, whether they're inside or outside city
Mhm.
limits.
right, okay.
Travis, you have your mute off. Where you? So on purpose?
So, I don't have a CPO where I live, not that I'm aware of. I live out in, I guess they call it Garfield. We have a range out here, but it's not real active other than I think they have a quilting group. But we don't, I mean, I would say, so I live off Divers and so all of Divers and Tamala Mountain and Porter and all these areas out here. I don't know how we would, grasp those people's thoughts, but I can tell you from talking to any of my neighbors, they very much feel disconnected of what's going on in our city and some of the decisions that are being made. So I do think it's a huge need.
Go ahead.
How does funding work for us to send out a piece of paper survey?
Yeah, you guys did put money in your budget. So if you wanted to send out paper surveys, there's money in your budget. I think you asked for $1,200. So that's something you could do if you wanted to, is to mail out surveys. or print them up and people could drop them off at, like gas stations where they have reader boards, or grocery stores, or those kind of places often exist around neighborhoods too.
Can we also do, or is it available to do a link for the city website?
Yeah.
and The city Facebook page and things like that, all those vehicles too?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Cool. That's what I thought so, but
Yeah, if we had that on the city website, on several of the local Facebook groups, I could tell them, go to the city website.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna step back and ask again for I really want to distill down the purpose of the survey, because I think that really understanding the purpose of the survey will help us form questions.
And you don't have to just do one survey. You could do this as your first survey. You can do a totally different survey on a different subject later. So
Right, keeping it
yes,
narrower in focus, we'll have then less questions, more likely to get responses probably. And won't give us too broad of an environment to then address, which we can, only have the bandwidth to address a very small amount. So purpose.
Yeah, because the first one I'm looking at is because we know what it means. It's not vague, but I can see where it would be vague. Like, what barriers to access or inclusion have you experienced or witnessed in Estacada?
We
that's-
would need to provide examples, I think,
yeah.
for people to even
Yeah.
understand.
For instance,
And we
Yeah.
could then, add in then like regarding transportation, language, internet,
911.
inside it or
yeah.
outside of city limits.
Even police response.
Mhm.
I mean, that might be a good. Just first, because of the complexity of those questions. That might be a good place to start, is to take one of those questions and then break it down into. Giving people choices about like these other things like you were talking about that they feel they don't have access to. And then obviously at the end, you could be like, here's a blank for, fill in the blank if you think that we've missed something. I think
We could,
that's.
make it more personal. Like, what have you seen that, how do I say it? Have you seen any barriers such as, have you, or, not just in general, have you seen, and that way we could get like examples or.
And this question does say, have you experienced or witnessed? It just
Oh,
doesn't
yeah,
start
yeah.
out super personal, but we could have a real nice soft touch
Such
intro paragraph.
We could also, as far as what questions or issues should the council consider, we could put suggestions for them to choose, like in order of priority. Here's 5 things in order of priority. How would you order them as the most important to have access to? And then like leave a blank if it was something we hadn't thought of to put on the list.
Do you have a list of the questions? What was the second question?
This one, what questions or issues should the council consider to ensure access and inclusion for city services, programs, and infrastructure?
I just, when you get too broad, you potentially run into the risk that you're going to ask questions that the city can't help with. So they might be things that the city has no control over. And not that I'm saying don't ask those, but you're giving input to the council to try and make changes within what the city has control over, then the city council has control over. So make that part of your consideration for building your questions is, can they actually do something with the information that you?
Maybe
Right.
a simpler approach within having so many different topics is to have like, what areas of representation do you feel you have access to or you're lacking access to? And then it could be, fire district, or it could be tax revenue, or you know what I mean, and just go down the list and people could check off which ones apply to them, and then we'd have a better idea of sort of the general concerns, or even then based on, maybe the first question is, do you live in or out of the city? And then we know that, oh, everybody who lives out of the city is concerned about, making, rules around, like if there's gonna be a fireworks ban this year or all that kind of stuff. I mean, we just had 70 trucks on site or whatever, or 17, I'm sorry,
For Highland.
last week, which
Mhm.
is terrifying. So those kind of topics, and just make a long list and be like, all right, there's 2 questions, but you have 20 things that you can check that can, whether it concerns you or doesn't. Did I just spin you in the opposite
No,
direction?
no, so that makes me think like if we use the city website as sort of the categories, because like maybe, and I don't know it off the top of my head enough. But to know if the categories that already exist on the city website, how it's broken up, if we can somehow use that to form our questions about what people feel like they already do have access or the ability to participate in or don't. And I think it would be really good to be able to let people express things really positively and negatively. So not just what don't you have access to, but like, what do you feel that you are
Right.
really aware of and can participate in easily?
Well, and that might be a nice warm fuzzy to the city when we do report, to be like, people feel really good about this,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And not just have it be a laundry list of
Yes,
complaints.
they're like one section that we could.
Yeah, so I mean, the website's kind of a mess right now, but are you thinking like we have these sections here with the like government, community, business, services, or are you thinking like when we go into government, there's like code enforcement and community development and the library and the municipal court? I mean,
Is it something that we could do one that's around government, one that's around community, one that's around, I don't know if any of the other
Well,
ones.
they have the 3 things right here: city services, programs, and infrastructure. Could we split it up like that?
What are considered city services?
so the services that the city provides, water, sewer, streets, I mean, those are also would be infrastructure too, but and then there's the things that the city provides that are not as infrastructure based, like library programs and the events that you guys put on and the Parks and Rec puts on, and those are city services. Those kind of things, especially the events that the committees put on, are more open to outside residents.
Yeah, I don't want to open a can of worms by allowing a whole bunch of people to comment on how they can't have access to tax dollars when there's, nothing that we can change about that.
Right.
Mhm.
So I don't particularly think that we need to be so complicated. I think there's a lot of people in the city who need this survey to be simple. I think the first question, we could just simply say, what barriers, what causes you to feel excluded? What have you experienced or witnessed in Estacada to make you feel excluded? The second question, I think, is too complicated. And I think if we listed different departments, I think that would just be too lengthy. That's just my 2 cents. I think one question would be plenty. I don't think we need to, I think we need to start simple, because I think, like Michael said, or someone was saying, that if we have too long of a survey, I know my neighbor, I talked to my neighbor and she knows exactly, what she's frustrated with, whether it's, wherever, right? Where she and I both talk, and we're both talking about our frustrations, be it the city or the federal government or whatever. So I think people know the issues. It's just we need to maybe give them a simple question to get them dialoguing.
I'm just thinking if you provide a blank space, how do we quantify that throughout?
Or
So yes, ask a
Interpret.
question like that, maybe ask a question on the other side of the coin, what makes you feel included? But I think it might be good to have those options. And also, like you said, maybe a question at the end, like a blank space for them to say things, because otherwise, how are you? It's really hard to go through data with
Right.
all different things on it.
So you mean.
Yeah.
Multiple choice. like,
Yeah.
Do you
Yeah.
see it in the fire department? Do you see it in the water department? Because
I just don't even know if people are gonna know that they've experienced a barrier.
Mhm.
I don't know if they're attempting to connect. I mean, I know some are, but I don't know that everybody is going to look at, to think that way. So, I mean, what if we asked a question about, have you participated in a city event or with city government in some way, and we could have a list of examples. And then, if not, why not? And then we could have a list of choices. I don't know.
or asking people directly, do you feel like you have access to city government in a way that your concerns are met or
Yeah.
something like that? Because I think that that's the real issue that people are having, is they maybe don't have direct access. They don't know how to access that representation. They're not willing to, maybe they're 84 and they have a walker and can't get around. They can't come down and complain at city council about this, that, and the other thing. And just start there with like, what do you feel like you have access to and don't, or what are you missing? What do you have? Yeah, that's within that. I think we have to sort of simplify the topics, and then what maybe we do is just start blanketing once a month or something like that, have a new question, and then they can sort of compound, based on the feedback we're getting. Go ahead.
and I would suggest at the very beginning, put a paragraph, the reason we're sending you this survey, because
Yeah.
a lot of times I get a survey and it's just like, what are they gonna do with it? And it's not gonna change my life. Just to say, we are trying to address people who maybe haven't been heard. That's why we're sending out this survey, because we don't know if you're out there or not. Hello, are you out there?
Well, yeah, and ideally, the more people that participate in their community, the better it becomes. So that's the whole, I think, driving force of this, is especially within people's concerns about sort of the traditional fabric of the way the city feels as a small town. I think that they want to make sure that, or we need to sort of represent that whole ideology. If you want this to be a great little town where you know people and you can say hi to everyone on the street and your kids are safe or whatever, then get involved and it's about outreach, it's about representation, it's about meeting your neighbors, familiarity, all of those different things. I think that the more that people are,
Connected.
well, and COVID did the number on us, right? Everyone would rather just play it safe and sort of read about it on Facebook, and it's like, no, this is your town. So
But
like,
what did another number the other way, in a positive way, was that fire.
right?
That fire brought I know it put
This-
me in the community.
the
more.
same
I met
year.
more people.
Yeah.
It had.
The same year,
Yeah.
everything shut down and then that happened and it
made
was
people
like,
just, like, help each other. I met people I'd never met before
Mhm.
because of that fire.
well, and there's only one way through an emergency event like that, and that is community.
Come together.
So,
So if we were always together like that, instead of
Right.
when the smoke is over the town, maybe,
right.
So do we want the question to be focused on like government and representation or programming? Or are they simple and distinct enough that we could have it like a simple question about both of those things?
well, we're
I-
trying to find out, I'm sorry.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, we're trying to find out who is usually overlooked or has been historically overlooked. So I think it would be services like if they're being overlooked, what if, I don't know how to say it because I'm not very good. What have you felt you've been missing out on? You know what I mean? Because that's what we're trying to get through is the people that don't usually speak up a lot and get access to the services. We're looking for the forgotten. Ones. You know, so there would be services like, can you get fired? Do you feel like you can get fired? Do you feel like your concerns are being addressed if your water bill's too high? You know, I was just trying to follow up on your question. You know,
Mhm.
what do we want to make the questions to
Right.
addressing is the people who are underrepresented, right?
Well, and I think really the idea too is to bring not to try and, we're not trying to solve the issues of what's lacking. We're just trying to bring that conversation to the higher, to the city council itself and say, you know, based on what we're hearing, 80% of Estacada doesn't think that an ambulance is going to show up within an hour, you know what I mean, or whatever. And then we're like, oh, well, that's a concern that everyone feels that is based on your health. And we don't, you know, are feeling like we don't have access to this. So let's see what can be done about that. A, B, C, D, you know what I mean? So I think that if we're going to start something that's really asking people this question, it's got to be really broad and simple to start with. Do you live in town? Do you live out of town? Do you feel like your voice matters? Yes or no?
Tammy, go ahead.
So, I think services, I agree with that. I think that's a huge need to have on the survey. I have been hearing, and I have quite a bit myself, frustration with the infrastructure that's not in place with all the building that's been happening. There's a lot of people frustrated with that. It's not just me. It's a lot of people. You talk to people in Estacada, they're frustrated. And so I think we need to have that on the survey. We need to have something about infrastructure, would be like grocery. You know, do you feel like you have good access to groceries? Do you feel that our grocery store is adequate? You know, services like that, because as we are building more people are moving in. We have a lot more traffic on our roads, on our highway. And I know myself, I don't like to drive into town if I don't have to for groceries because I like to support our town and all the jobs here. But I feel very frustrated that it doesn't seem like our city is doing anything about it. I've actually talked to the planners. So I think it would be helpful for us to come back with a lot of surveys that said, look, to our city council, look, this is what people are saying. You know, they don't have this service or that service, or, you know, they need to get an oil change and they have to go into Sandy, or, you know, they have no access to go to, you know, maybe they can't pay for gas to go to Sandy. I don't know.
Yeah.
But, you know, we need to ask about surveys or services. I think that's really important.
So I think we're talking about two different things. There's government services, the things that government provides, such as fire, such as police, those kind of services. That's what government provides. Oil change, the grocery stores, those are all private businesses, and the government has no control over any of those. And there's very little that we can do as a government entity in order to bring a grocery store in here.
Yeah, that's not infrastructure.
That's nothing that the city can do. And I understand, because I'm usually the one fielding the calls about the grocery stores, that it's very frustrating to people. However, we're working on doing a market research study, and that will help us be able to quantify this in like consumer data, which matters a lot more to the people who have the grocery store chains than this survey. that's why I wanted to quantify that the things that you need to be asking are things that we have control over, and we have no control over grocery stores, or, if there's an oil change place, or the price of gas at the gas stations.
Right,
Yeah.
I get that. I get that. So would we have control over our own police force?
Yes,
Okay, so that should be included
that
because
could be a question. Yes.
that has also been an issue on the neighborhood watch.
Is there, I'm naive about this kind of thing. Is there such a thing? Are there grants available to say attract a minority business owner to open a grocery store or oil change place here to bring them into the town?
The city doesn't have grants or funding for that.
Okay.
Now, there are like small business administration loans that are targeted towards like minority owned businesses that they could take advantage of. But there's nothing that we have, and we don't have the capacity to run that kind of program, nor do we have the funding to run that kind of
Right.
program.
But Elena, within the market research, essentially what we can do is do some of the footwork to make Estacada proved that Estacada is inviting from a consumer base standpoint of just like, this is a great place to open this because this service is lacking based on what, and that's not the city's responsibility, but
Well, the research is what,
Yeah,
First
so,
thing they
so
need for
the,
those
Right.
towns is that market research.
Right.
They need
the,
that.
the way the market research works is every time you spend money, they track all the money you spend. And so the market research can access that and say, okay, people within this zip code spend this much money and they're traveling this many miles
Right.
to spend that. And then we can take that information to say a retailer, like we take it to the chain Winco or Safeway or whatever and say, hey, look, at market research says that we have, this much spend that's coming out of our zip code.
Right.
It would make it more attractive to them.
Who
I
collects
mean-
that? Where is that at?
That data,
That market
has
place?
not been collected.
it has not been collected. No, we're just contracting with them. We're probably going to have it done in like the winter, maybe spring. So
Right.
we don't have the data yet.
But I mean, how many people drive to Freddy's for weekly groceries because
Winco.
it's a 20% less?
Winco.
Right. But I mean, that's exactly the point, right? And you'll be able to have a quantifiable
Yes.
data to say X amount of people are driving 10 miles to spend this much money, and then that can be looked at by those kind of, potential retailers.
so the things the city does have control over are the things on the website,
There you go.
right? So. But I don't think there's anything on there. Is there stuff on there about public safety?
Yeah, there's a page on public safety, which it kind of refers to because we contract with Clackamas County Sheriffs. So it just put people over to Clackamas County Sheriff. But, if you want to ask a question, do you feel safe?
Okay.
And that could be, if you feel unsafe, do you feel unsafe because of this, or this, or this?
Yeah, because like if an ambulance is gonna take an hour to get here, my kid is hurt, I'm gonna drive him to the hospital.
Yeah, so
Did it. Done it. Takes 23 minutes to get.
But
the
what do you think if somebody were to open a survey and the question is, do you feel safe?
Right.
I'm just
Or-
like, I mean, from this group that again, I don't think we're all that well known.
yeah,
Is it also our place to be able to ask questions like, do you think Estacada needs a police force? Do you think you have adequate fire services? You know what I mean? Those kind of things, or are we? Like, I think that part of the complication is that we all live as civilians and we all have these list of concerns or needs or whatever that may or may not be met. Is this the place to try and voice those things, or is
Are we
this
focusing on access? Are we focusing on, I think
Right.
it would be good if we could just narrow that down too on
It's a bigger question.
what we're trying to,
yeah.
what information we're going to get, what we want to do with it.
Mhm.
Because the fire district is not part of the city. It's a
No.
completely different district. So if we're talking about
Right.
ambulance, if we're talking about firefighters, all that funding, all those decisions are made by the fire board, not by city council. And so city council, again, does not have any ability to have any impact on that change.
Can I ask layman questions that I
Yeah.
should know the answer to?
Nope.
The fire board is STK. We're not part of Clackamas County
No,
Fire,
we're not.
right?
Yes,
That whole,
Anymore.
right, that was voted on a couple years ago.
Correct.
But there's a separate fire board that
Correct.
runs everything on the city's behalf, unrelated to the city council.
Unrelated to the city and on a larger district, kind of like the school district.
Okay,
So if
okay,
you look at it more like
okay.
that, so the school district has larger boundaries, everything within those boundaries is run by the school district board or the fire board.
And clearly there's some kind of a route between the city council and the fire board. I mean, those two institutions
They have to
communicate with
talk.
each other.
And they had a joint meeting
Okay,
this month,
cool.
but they don't, it's not like it's they talk every month and have,
okay.
but they do talk to each other.
I think we could use this survey as an opportunity to also educate people a little bit more on what the city actually has
Yeah.
control over by sort of listing out all of the ways that civilians, whether in city limits or without, can participate. So if we have all, like, I don't know, do we list all the committees? I don't know, but just to, I mean, I think if we do it right, we could also help people understand that you're complaining to the wrong people about a lot of the things.
Yeah,
Or even
yeah.
ask like, have you participated in city government? Do you know about commissions? And just have it be a yes, no question. And then people are like, oh, I can't just go yell at the mayor when somebody's speeding on my road, you know what I mean, or
Right.
whatever. I think this is gonna take a little bit of time to develop.
A short, like, you're talking like a short civics lesson, a local civics lesson,
I mean,
because they don't teach it in the school.
right, right. How city government works.
Right,
I'd like to, know.
right.
Just kidding, but yeah.
No,
To me.
it makes a lot of sense because a lot of people are very confused. And when you explain things to them, like, they're like, why do you keep allowing all these new housing developments? We don't have the infrastructure.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
and when you
that's a lot.
explain, we can't deny them. The state sets rules and regulations and we can't say no. And then they're like, oh, okay, I understand.
Right.
And so if we did like kind of a little 101 course on,
Also where
government.
your tax dollars go.
Yeah.
Where your tax dollars go.
But if you want to do a survey on things that people can right now influence, so that'd be things like parks and the arts and they could come and attend the traffic and public safety, and the traffic and public safety talks things about like crosswalks and speeds and signage for speeding. And so all of the committees that you guys serve on are ones that people can come and make recommendations, and then it will get passed on to council. So that might be a good place to start.
Just with like, what do you know about the committees? Have you participated in them? Or here's how you can participate in them to get the voices funneled up.
Well, yeah, and like you're saying, structure the questions in a way that are both mechanically educational, so people are like, oh, this really is the process. And then also figuring out what things are lacking or what things are sufficient, or, you know what I mean? But I think it's gotta be, because the problem is, we've talked for 30 minutes about what the potential questions could be. And so it's like, do you send people a 40-point bulletin thing? That's not gonna happen. It should start sort of, I almost feel like it should start really simply, and then it should sort of grow, as in like, oh, this commission does this, and they have a survey once a month that comes out, and they're asking questions about, or once a week maybe, so that by the time we have our next meeting, we have 4 questions asked or answered, or 3 questions answered, or something like that. Yeah, I mean, I have a tendency to overcomplicate things, so.
I do too. My brain just goes in the weeds immediately every time.
So what could be two or three super simple general questions? Do you have concerns in the city of Estacada, or would you like to have your voice better represented in, you know what I mean? Do you live in town? Do you live out of town? Do you think, you know what I mean? Simple, but like to start with.
Well, so this is sort of focusing on the I in our work, right? The inclusion piece. So if we use the committees as our vehicle for gauging inclusion and for helping people understand that this is their access to city government, city functions, would we want to include, each of the committees that exist that people can participate in via public comment? And have you ever participated in, or have you wanted to, or I don't know how to like distill it, because I think people need to know what the purview of each of those areas are. So it's like, this is where you would go to bring up comments
that's
about
what-
these
yeah.
things. And this is where you would go to bring up comments about
Like what you were
this.
saying earlier about the short educational part. I mean, it would help me before I got into all this and was frantically doing internet research all the time. Would be like, this committee, if you have issues about this is the committee you want to address those issues with. This committee, just-
Right. And then what would prevent you from doing that?
Because I
or-
guarantee you there's going to be people out there that go, oh, or like, I didn't know that committee existed.
Yeah.
Or,
Maybe they don't feel welcoming.
yeah. So.
Maybe that's a good place to start is, do you feel like
You could.
you could or would feel comfortable serving, taking a position on a commission? Because I mean, don't we still have vacancies on different commissions?
No,
They're
they're,
not.
they're all full right now.
But it's even like lower than that. You could just participate by either sending an email.
Yeah.
You can show up to the public comment portion. It's like, those are the baby steps, like, and then it goes on to serving on a committee or commission, and then, maybe running for city council, but.
Maybe we could call it like access to your city or something,
Mhm.
and be like, do you know you can serve on a commission? Yes or no, or what? I don't know. I mean, that might be a little insulting. I think
No,
most
I
people-
mean, I was just representing the city, talking about our natural hazard mitigation plan at the event the fire district had last week. And then somebody came up and there was asking me about this. And I'm like, well, you don't live inside city limits. I'd still welcome your feedback, but also take the county. And she started talking about how she doesn't feel like she has any input to the city. And I'm like, well,
Mhm.
have you thought about serving on any of these committees? And she's like, I didn't know I could serve on any of these committees. And so, yeah, that is something that I don't think people realize if they're not getting all of our news, is that they can serve on these committees, even though they don't live within city limits.
I wonder if the first point to send these out is we send it, I don't know if you can do this with the school boards. I don't know if this is like legal. Send them home with every senior. Send these questions home with every senior to bring home to their families. Because not everybody that goes to school, we get both. The outside people and the city people go to our schools. That would be a good way that it would get out there in the hinterland. You know what I mean? Get this out there.
That's one
And-
way.
And we could get the next generation of voters and people that live here and citizens who are legally becoming adults, 18-year-olds involved early.
It might be more of like a table, like when they're doing the voter signups and they're just kind of loitering outside of places. Because I think too, that we've tried to access the schools directly with the Arts Commission, and it is not, doesn't,
no.
we just haven't, we're like, oh, we have this for the students, and then we want to engage them and and it just doesn't even make it past the front desk. Now, I think it's also kind of like city politics. It's about like, do you know who to talk to, or when to talk to them, or what to tell them, or how it should be worded, or what the incentive is, or whatever, you know what I mean? So there's like a process, but I think that you're right, the getting into educating kids that are coming out of school about participating. I mean, young kids too are smarter,
A youth council was part of the discussion last meeting,
right?
right?
Yeah.
So
And I don't know if Andrea had a chance to, because we reached out to Chris, who's the dean of students, about what the best process was. And I know Andrea was going to reach out to, and I
Right.
don't know if she had a chance to.
Well, this
Yeah.
might be the timing that we need to like develop something over the summer, because obviously we're sort of missing the window here with the kids in school. For the fall to be like, all right, now that we all have some time to breathe and summer's happening, like, let's get this geared up so that next year, maybe the kids can start their own little committee of, addressing these kind of issues within their own little, sub-community at school too, you know?
I don't mean that in a snide way. I have a 17-year-old. So I hear
For
her
real.
talking with her friends
For
down the
real.
hall, listening, and it's just like, wow, they're talking about all kinds of, they talk to each other,
Right.
so.
So it seems like we're having problems figuring out what questions to ask.
That's correct.
Do you think it may be worth sending a blank survey saying what barriers do you face? And then future surveys, you can dive into the specific answers to help guide
Right.
you.
To make it general, and then the next one narrow. it
barriers
down.
to participating in
In
city opportunities.
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
city opportunities
Yeah.
might be one of the things, or,
Services.
I mean,
services.
but again, we can't control or address a lot of the things outside of the city opportunities. So,
So we should put that on there too, things we cannot address.
but then why would we ask? If we're not gonna, I mean, I don't want to waste anybody's time with
Mhm.
collecting their feedback that might be really difficult for them to share if we have no ability to make it better for them.
But I think you can do both. You can, if you summarize in the beginning, hey, this is what we can do and this is what we can't do, just so they have an idea of what our capacity or our abilities are. That way they're not flooding us with a bunch of stuff that we can't do anything about.
So this is kind of going back to what Aaron and Michael were talking about with kind of how a lot of people probably don't know who we are. Why don't we just introduce our committee with a question? This is who we are. And then a blanket question, just to get the ball rolling and the conversation open and introduce ourselves.
I'm just saying, like, part of our job is to increase access and participation to City of Estacada, whatever's.
So look at the code that's specifically related to your committee, which says that it's to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion among Estacada's government and communities, advise the city on creation and development of equity lens, provide input on programs and systems to address equity, diversity, equity, and inclusion issues. You want to take some of that that wording from your code that outlines your purpose and form questions on it.
There's been a lot of good ideas, so it's hard to put it all together.
Yeah, it's hard to distill it down.
But I mean, that might be an easy way for us to start and also say, hey, we're here for you and we want to be here for you.
Yeah, I think that you might be onto something with sort of, for lack of a better description, like a mission statement to the public. To be like, this committee exists. This is what we're trying to do. Do you know about us? Yes or no? Do you feel like you have barriers in access to things in your community? Yes or no? And just kind of, have it be like a paragraph they can read about what we do. Or what we're trying to do, and then a couple simple questions to sort of get the ball rolling.
This is just for me because I'm, as we're talking, I'm just sort of picturing getting this survey somehow and looking at it and what would be an example of a barrier To access.
Do you have a car? Do you,
Internet.
can you get to the grocery store? Do you have other, I mean, like you're saying, services are a huge part. I mean, there's so many elderly people that live on rural properties. Like, well, I have an 86-year-old neighbor and I was building a mini horse shed for her this week with my 9-year-old. And she came over and was like, oh, my family left to go camping somewhere and they've been gone for 3 days. And I don't know. And I'm like, what? Like, what? And she's getting around on her walker or whatever. And I'm like, oh man. So, I mean, her concerns are going to be, if I fall over in the barn, will someone find me? Do I have internet access? Do I have cell phone service? Like, will the fire department show up? I mean, they have. So I know the answer to that question, but I think that, those kind of things. And just like you're saying, start laying out the framework to people of like, what are your concerns? And then kind of we can be like, oh, that's the city's realm, or, that's not. And just make those differentiations. But yeah, this is a complicated thing to do. I mean, in the larger sort of perspective of it.
What we're trying to do is find out if there are patches of areas that are underserved, that don't. It's just going from general to what you said was very specific. Do you have a car? Do you have, a way to get groceries, whatever,
I mean, transportation would be just one category that we could dive into. There's no Lyft drivers out here. There's no Uber drivers out here. Like people are paying radio cab drivers $300 to get to OHSU and back. You know what I mean? Like is like those kind of things. And that's not necessarily city business, but it is a community concern. You know what I mean? So I think that that's sort of one of those things. Because then again, our purpose here is to be able to go to the city and be like, here's the short list of what people feel like is missing.
If people can't get into town easily, they're unable to attend events that you put on for this population. So can we offer these events in different locations? Can we offer them virtually or, like it helps them, or offer transportation. So
Right.
yeah, by bringing those issues forward, it helps.
But this is
Programming.
opening Pandora's box too.
Right. So small, narrow,
Right.
close the door a little, just narrow it up.
And are we do we have permission to make a little bio in the city's space about this? I mean, if we write a little intro paragraph about like what we're doing and what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
Obviously all that can.
You have a page on the
Okay.
city's website
Cool.
and you can decide what goes on that page.
I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with
Yeah,
that.
no problem. And you would send it to me as your staff person to upload it.
So not having information that has to be updated frequently is preferred.
Mhm.
Well, and again, I think if we just ask the question, do people know how to access or share their voice? That may then, I think we can assume that people are going to say, no, I don't have a voice. I don't know how to participate. And then that could lead to us saying, okay, well, we need to do a better job of each of our landing pages for each of our committees, really speaking in clear, simple language, what each of these groups does and how they can impact city policy and how people can get involved in those. And then how do we drive people to those sites?
Right. I mean, I think that that's part of what we're uncovering is that when it comes to inclusion, a lot of people need to leadership, right? You need someone to help you learn about things so that you understand you have different access points and different opportunities that you may be just unaware of. So maybe that's kind of a, place to, like you're saying, place to start. I mean, personally
I think I
speaking,
know what you're talking about, but I want to make sure.
right, personally speaking, I was one of those people that was like, man, I'd really like to have a voice at the table because there are people like me in this community I can't serve on, my kids weren't in school here. They were in a charter school. They'll be in public school in Estacada next year. I can't serve on or run for city council. So the things that I knew about that were sort of larger things, school board, city council, I knew I didn't have access to. So I was like, well, I've been a musician for 30 years. I bet I could at least do the arts thing. And then sort of, realizing that the familiarity, the whole function of the city is a relatively small pool of people. So it really is about knowing who, what, when, where, and how it gets done. Knowing the process is the other thing. And a lot of people, I think, get to a point where they learn about the process and then they're dissuaded or discouraged. You know what I mean? They're like, oh, well, that's really how that works.
It seems like nothing will
Right.
happen. It seems like you know what I mean? Like.
Yeah. I mean, well, right, except that you do have access if you can learn about the route forward. And I think that we should make part of the sort of goal here is to just raise people's awareness. Because that, you might even be just under the impression that you don't have access to something that you do, but you just didn't know about it. You know what I mean?
Right, yeah.
So, I mean, I think that's another thing is just raising people's awareness of the process.
So I would suggest that we introduce ourselves, and I don't necessarily mean like personally introduce ourselves, but introduce our committee. Here's when we started, and it was an opportunity to bring the diverse populations of Estacada together. And here's what we do. Something about like, hey, did you know we existed? That's a simple question, yes or no. Do you know that you can participate in our meetings? Yes or no?
Mhm.
And then, did you also know that we have committees that deal with and like the art events in town? Yes or no? Traffic and public safety concerns? Yes or no? Parks and recreation offerings? Yes or no? Library programming? Yes or no? And just to kind of get in like a generic idea of if people know that all these things exist, it also kind of lays out, whether you're in or outside of city limits, you have a voice that can impact any of these broad areas. And then that might give us info at, do they know anything about any of us? Do they just not know about us?
Can we, or should we also ask if they're in town or out of town? Does
Yeah.
that make, and
Yeah.
because, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. That's a place to start.
Yeah, but what I'm wondering is the people that don't have access because of a physical barrier, they don't have internet or they don't know how to use it well. They don't have a smartphone, so they can't zoom in. How do they know when the meeting's gonna happen? I mean, those are the ones that are the most important. They don't know how to, not only do they not know we're here, but even if we tell them there's this committee, they'll be like, yeah, so what? I mean, they don't know how to get in touch with us. They can't Zoom, they can't drive down here.
Or maybe the solution then, as was sort of stated earlier, is like, do you know someone
Yes.
lacking access? Do you know a 90-year-old who lives on their property who doesn't have internet or a cell phone? And that
So
also.
do they want access?
Right, I
Yeah.
mean, that's also, but also to be like, the whole vibe is to make this an extension of the community and to be like, do you have family members or neighbors that don't have access to A, B, and C or whatever? And then be like, the whole idea is to be like, you can help them. You know what I mean? Do you have internet? Okay, well, you should, you can tell them about this, and this, because we're bringing it to your awareness. Now you can sort of bring it to other people's awareness or just, pass it on.
It might also be helpful to ask, how do you receive your news or information?
Right.
So then we know what channels they're already using. So when we're out spreading news, we know that we're reaching channels that they're already using.
Thank you for bringing in the function of things and not just the.
So it is after 6.
Uh-huh.
I want to be mindful of your guys' time. So I think we have enough that we can have a draft. You guys feel, do you feel there's consensus that we can start on kind of this is what we do. Have you heard of us? And then have you heard of all these other committees? And then how do you receive your news? Does that seem like a good first draft?
Yeah.
And we can bring it back to the next meeting and everybody can look at it?
Mhm,
Yes.
mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, then I want to ask about the next meeting because the next meeting is going to be July 3rd. And we are open, but I know that's a holiday for a lot of people. So I don't want to schedule a meeting if we're not going to have a quorum. So is everybody available to meet July 3rd?
Yeah, I can't afford a vacation.
I'll be out of town.
Okay.
Can you zoom in? I don't know. I'm not gonna be like. I'm gonna be in the States. I don't think that. Okay. I'd be happy if I
You won't
did,
have
and then
access to
I'll do-
services.
Yeah. If there is some, I will zoom in.
I'll be here.
I'll-
I'm
I'll be here.
around. Travis, are you around on July 3rd?
I am.
Okay, so we just need to check with
that's
Tammy and
4.
Valerie,
Okay.
but most of us. Well,
As long
we're
as,
4. That's
as,
4.
yeah, as long as there's 4, there's enough for a quorum. So if Denise, Aaron, Michael and Travis will be here, then we'll have enough for a quorum and you guys can move forward. Great. Okay, then we'll leave it on the 3rd.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Elena. I appreciate you being the organizing force behind this. So,
How are we gonna talk to each other about constructing this survey? I mean, if we're only meeting once a
Are-
month.
are you accumulating bullet points on our,
Yes, you can email me the information. I will put it all together and bring it to your next meeting.
fantastic
Yep.
brains of the operation?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Do we want to move down the rest of I think that we kind of are
Yes,
not
please.
ready for the scheduling until we have the survey ready.
Right.
And
We're
we're
not ready for the one pager. Yep.
Okay, great. So do we want to move down the rest of the agenda?
So where are we at?
Public comment?
Oh, public comment?
No one?
Here. Committee comments. Anybody?
Is there any committee comments?
I want to say just 2 things. One, something for your brains to think about. And I thought was really interesting that I heard there are discussions about diversity, equity, and inclusion groups being renamed like diversity, equity, and belonging, which is a more positive term. Like when you think about inclusivity, it's like we create inclusion as opposed to people just feeling like they belong. And I just thought that was an interesting conversation and thinking about words, because words matter. And then the other thing is if you have an iPhone, I just discovered the Translate app. I don't know why it's been on my home screen since I got my phone. The Translate app is fantastic. And I work with like people who speak every language possible. And there's the ability to have conversations with somebody through your phone where you can each press the record button and it translates it into the other person's language, like, and it splits your screen in half. So you can literally be like talking to somebody and translating in real time. I just think it's a helpful resource to people for people to understand, to work with people who speak languages other than English and are having a hard time communicating. Yeah.
What? I think we're,
So
Good.
play with that. Yeah,
I will.
that was all. Thank you.
Do you guys have, I mean, some of them are obvious, but Todos Juntos, do you guys have the contact information for that as far as like phone numbers or email or anything like that?
I think Julie Searing is the main contact. I get emails from them all the time.
I was gonna say, I could look at any school email. It's usually
Okay.
listed in there.
Yeah.
Any other committee comments?
I think we're good for,
All right. I don't know what to say.
Meeting adjourned,
Meeting adjourned.
6:09.
Whack
Thank
it.
you.
Oh, you're so-
Yeah, whack it.
So gentle.
It was gently
I'm
done.
gonna send Tina over here.